Chapter 111. When Death Knocks. Riel outrightly told Hyun-ki that she did not love him anymore. Hyun-ki stared at Riel severely, and in an angry tone, he protested. Because of Akio? What if there is no Akio around? Would you refuse me? No, because you are a weak and a helpless woman, who could never last a day without a man to help you stand alone. Riel was dumbfounded and staggered by Hyun-ki's statement. Is that how you come to know me? You had underestimated me too low that you looked at me as a dependent, that I could not stand on my own, a weakling? How could you? How dare you? Simultaneously Hyun-ki got a slap from Riel, and Hyun-ki became conscious of the words he stated. He quickly apologized and hugged Riel. That is not what I meant, Riel. I'm sorry. Hyun-ki was sobbing, trying to calm Riel's temper. After all we've been through, after taking you as you are, I have loved you sincerely, but had you? You are the kind of man who can never be satisfied with what life has endowed you. You only used me to satisfy yourself. You want to see yourself from another's perspective on how to be married, only to feed your ego. Now I realize you made me fall into your end game. The more I hate you now. I wished I never let your son come to know you. You're not worthy of being Hyung-sik's father. Hyun-ki was flabbergasted. He was gobsmacked, and could not move an inch from where he stood. Riel turned away from Hyun-ki, and before she left him, Riel utterly remarked, I never want to see you again. Please leave. Hyun-ki felt so downcast and frustrated. He stood and walked in small paces out of the hallway, feeling defeated. His mind seemed to hang to nowhere, and when he was out of the main door, feeling disheartened and glum, he put his hands in his pockets and stood for a long time. His eyes welled in tears. His bodyguard, seeing him gloomy, seemingly as if he were not himself, immediately approached him. Sir, if you don't mind, I will drive for you. You looked unwell? Hyun-ki stared at him, smiled dryly, and said, Thank you, I can manage. He took more small steps toward his car, and started the engine. He sat for a while, and his thoughts wandered when he saw his hands holding the wheel. He gassed up, and drove slowly, tears falling down his cheeks. When the gate was opened, he cruised down the road when suddenly, in his vision, he saw Riel's angry face, telling him to leave, that she didn't want to see him again. Hyun-ki made a sudden break. He angrily pounced the wheel with his hands thrice, and sobbed, laying his head on the wheel. Oh, Riel, I'm so sorry. I still love you. One bodyguard from his entourage following him got off the van to see what was wrong with his boss. He saw Hyun-ki's head by the wheel, so he knocked concernedly. Sir, are you alright? Would you want me to drive for you? He asked. Hyun-ki raised his head and, without looking at his bodyguard, replied, I'm alright, I'll drive. So Hyun-ki sat up, his hands on the wheel, still teary-eyed. After some time, still crying, he drove his car again, until droplets of rain started pelting on the ground, and his car, as if the weather was commiserating with how he was feeling. From droplets to heavy downpours, Hyun-ki wept some more. He felt so alone and depressed. Tears welled from his eyes, and unmindful of the overspeed he was making, he continued to drive on the freeway. He kept driving at high speed, cars honking at him. But he cared less, as if he was entirely out of his mind. His entourage followed him. He drove his car in the middle, his entourage flashing their headlights to protect his way. Hyun-ki was driving blankly now, speeding his car ahead of his entourage, and with the heavy rain fogging his windshield, he didn't notice an incoming delivery truck toward his path. He got startled as the headlights were directly straight at him. His eyes grew wide in fear. Too late for Hyun-ki. He tried to swerve his car, but his brake came in too late. The road was slippery, caused by the heavy rains. The truck collided so hard toward Hyun-ki's Lexus, pushing it continually until it got stuck in between the truck and the perimeter wall on the pavement, knocking him unconscious. Hyun-ki had a head-on collision with a delivery truck that crushed the front of his car, and was in a fatal state. His security entourage panicked and rushed toward his car, and people who witnessed the accident came near the two vehicles, thinking of ways to remove them from the wrecked car and truck. A few minutes later, an ambulance and fire truck came to the rescue. In response to the call made to them, Hyun-ki's body was found almost unrecognizable. His face was disfigured, and had broken limbs, bloodied, and seemed lifeless. Rescuers rushed him to the hospital to save his life. One of the bodyguards tried to reach Hwan Chul, but his phone was busy, so they decided to follow the ambulance instead. One of the rescuers in the ambulance looked for something to identify him, and saw his mobile phone still intact. He scanned the contacts and saw the name, My Stubborn Brother. When he dialed it, Hwan Chul answered. Hello Hae-young. I've been calling you. It's about time you called, Huan Chul retorted. Sir, I am a paramedic. Your brother is now being rushed to the nearest hospital. Please come quick to identify him. Huan Chul was momentarily speechless. When he was about to ask some more, he received a text message, informing him of the hospital Haiyan Ki would be brought in. Huan Chul immediately gave a call to Riel. Previously, after Haiyan Ki left, Akio was comforting Riel, assuring her things would turn out well, now that she openly told Haiyan Ki about everything she felt, which Riel should have said earlier. If only she had been vocal beforehand. She was dressing up for work when her mobile phone rang, and she saw on her phone screen the name, Chul. She answered her phone and responded, "Hi," smilingly. "Riel, we are needed at the hospital. Haiyan Ki met an accident. Please hurry." Riel was speechless, and fear suddenly crept in. "Ruby, tell Junie to get the car quickly. There's an emergency at the hospital." Then she turned to Akio and said, "Haiyan Ki was rushed to the hospital. I'll leave Hyung Sik to you for a while. And I have to run." Akio was shocked and was lost for words. He carried Hyung Sik and hugged him tight, feeling fear creeping into his veins for Haiyan Ki. Huan Chul arrived at emergency room, and he stood by the door. He had just finished crying, and his empty gaze was toward his brother. Then, Riel found him phased and quiet. Riel approached him, and when Huan Chul could not speak, Riel rushed toward Haiyan Ki's bedside. A tube was placed on him, but he was already seemingly lifeless. His face was almost unrecognizable, his body was already cold as ice, and the lifeline from the monitor was weak. Haiyan Ki was completely inanimate. His life was at a brink of demise. Riel couldn't believe that Haiyan Ki was lying lifeless, and couldn't contain her feeling at that instance. Then she suddenly screamed hysterically, and bawled, shouting Haiyan Ki's name. Riel was shaking him to wake up, touching his arms and hands, and hugging him hopelessly. The heaviness in her heart was so full that she could no longer hold herself. She kneeled and wailed, calling out Haiyan Ki's name, asking, "Oh God, no. Why Haiyan Ki?" Why? Huan Chul came to Riel to comfort her, and both cried profusely. Haiyan Ki flatlined. The doctors tried to revive him, but was unsuccessful. Then was transferred to the morgue, where he was cleaned. After a while, Riel calmed down. Riel asked to be left alone with Haiyan Ki. She stood beside Haiyan Ki's cold body, and raised the white sheet to his chest, staring at him closely. That took a while. "You might be cold, Hyun," she whispered. Riel caressed his hair, then his face, and tears started to fall down her cheeks as she spoke. "What happened to us, Hyun? How did you lose your way?" She paused. Riel was sniffling. "If you had only told me you were not ready to have a baby, we should have waited, and I would have never gotten pregnant. Then maybe Hyungsik had never been born. But when you saw your son, you became exuberant. Your happiness for your son was irreplaceable." Riel angrily blamed Hyun, and continued, "If you only stopped, even for a little while, from seeing Rosemary, and had spent your time with me until I gave birth, maybe this has never happened. We should have been happier with our son. But can you blame me if my love for you waned? You said fate brought us together. But were we? Fate had played us. And now that you're completely gone, what do you think Hyungsik will feel? You didn't even think about your son. You only thought of yourself. How you were defeated. How painfully hurt you were now that you lost me. You even said you were so blessed to have a son despite your misdemeanor, were you? Why have you not thought about your son, rather than focusing on your love for me? You were unfair, Hyun. Until your last, you were only thinking of yourself. It would be best if you put your son before me. But look, you orphaned him. Now he'll grow up without a father. I am sorry we end up this way. I am so sorry that we ended up bitterly." Riel cried heavily, staring at Haiyan Ki for a very long time. "This is my last gaze of you, my love. You shall never be forgotten because your son, Hyungsik, who looks exactly like you. I will love and care for Hyungsik, and I'll see to it that he will grow up to be a good man, decent and respectable. This I promise you." Riel bent and pressed her lips to Haiyan Ki's, and whispered, "Goodbye, my love. Rest peacefully now. You are in God's hands. Farewell, babe." Will Riel survive this agonizing phase of her life? Keep following the remaining episodes from the Windows of the Heart series on my YouTube and TikTok channels. Please stand by for the ending. Thank you.